This is an oral history interview with Mrs. Henrietta Porterfield in her home on January 25th, 1983. The interviewer is Susan Gortner. Mrs. Porterfield, what was your father's name and where was he born?
His name was Stephen George Winkler. Is that all right? Can you hear that?
That's fine. And where was he born?
He was born in Germany.
Do you know what town?
Hamburg.
When did he come to this country?
When he was 16, to get out of the army. I think I told you that.
How did his whole family come over?
I think they all came at the same time. There were 5 brothers, and I think they all had the same idea. They didn't want to serve in the German army.
Where did they come?
Saginaw, Michigan.
How did they happen to pick that spot? Do you know?
I don't know, unless they had relatives. I think that's usually the way people came. They knew about something, a place, because their relatives were there.
And what was your mother's name?
Christine Seba, S-E-E-B-A.
And where was she born?
Bavaria, whatever that is now. I don't know what Bavaria was.
And when did her family come here then?
She was about 2.
And where did they come?
They came to Saginaw, too.
They came also to Saginaw. What type of work did your father do?
He was a contractor.
What type of things did he build?
Oh, lots of houses. He built the library in Saginaw. It was a private library, Hoyt Library. It's still standing, a beautiful building. He built a couple of motion picture places. Lots of beautiful homes. And the thing that's interesting, he only got to, I think, about the 6th grade, but he was a self-educated man. He could do math like, well, to be a contractor, you had to figure out feet and costs, put in bids. You really had to know your math. And he could do it. But he taught himself.
He went to school, of course, in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
Did he speak German in your home?
Well, they tried, but, we went to public school, and there was no way they were going to bring us up German. So they tried, and we could talk a little German, but it was mostly English. They talked pretty well.
How much?
They had to keep up with us.
How much schooling did your mother have?
I don't know. I don't think I ever asked her.
Did your mother ever work outside the home?
No.
How many brothers and sisters did you have?
Well, there were 6 in the family, but 2, a boy and a girl, died young. They had some kind of fever. And then my oldest brother died in France in World War I. So I had a sister and a brother who lived until a few years ago. I'm the last one.
Did anyone live with your family besides your brothers and sisters? Any grandparents?
I think my grandfather Winkler lived with us for a while, but I was so little when he died. Yeah, he did live with us for a while. It was, as I remember, it was kind of interesting. He had 2 daughters, but he liked my mother. And I was nothing against his daughters, but he liked my mother. And I think he just enjoyed living with us better than with his 2 daughters. And not that he didn't like his daughters, but he just... my mother was a cheerful, easy-going person, and I think he just liked to live with us.
What type of chores did you do? Did you live in town then? Did you have chores to do around the house?
Oh, I think we helped with the dishes and things like that. I can't remember that we ever did a whole lot, though. Help was so cheap. I remember my mother always had a woman came in and did the laundry, And we always had what they called a hired girl. And she lived with us.
Oh.
But probably worked for $3 a week, you know. But they were part of the family. They ate with us. We never made them feel like they were helping or working for us.
Yeah.
Then about twice a year, my mother had a woman come in and make shirts for my father and my brothers. I don't know, maybe you couldn't buy decent ones in the stores way back 80 years ago, I don't know. But they come in and make sew for about a week. And at that time, I remember when my sister and I, we wore middies and pleated skirts a lot. You know, midi blouses with the collar and they'd make us a couple of blouses and skirts and dresses. And they just stayed there all day.
They stayed with you.
And sewed and then go on someplace else. I know a lot of people think it's funny when you don't make your own clothes, but my mother never cared about sewing, and I never did either. I guess that's why. It was just...
So you had these couple of ladies come in and do your sewing for you.
Mm-hmm.
Did you buy many of your clothes in the store, or were most of them made by
No, there wasn't much in the store when I was a girl, I remember. Not much, there weren't racks and racks of clothes. Of course, by the time I got to college, then there were a lot of clothes in the store. But when we were little girls, my mother had them made, mostly.
That's interesting. What kind of games did you play with your brothers and sisters as you were growing up?
I don't remember ever playing with my brothers. Well, my youngest brother was 6 years older, and my oldest brother was in high school when I was born. So he was more like a second father to me. My sister, we did a lot of we loved to ice skate, and, sleds and stuff like that. And in the summer, we always went to the beach. And I don't know about any games, really.
You grew up in an ideal spot for the beach.
Oh, yeah. We were just about 15 miles from Saginaw Bay, which is a big area. But as far as games, I don't remember any games.
Where did you go to school then, your grade school?
I went to Saginaw. Can't remember the name of the grade school. Oh, Germania. I don't know why it was called Germania.
How many grades did you attend there?
Well, I went there 6 years, and then I went to a Lutheran school for 2 years because my folks wanted us to be confirmed. And then I went to Saginaw High School. Then I went to the University of Chicago for 4 years.
Did you walk to school when you were in grade school?
Oh, yes.
Did
There was no other way to go.
Was it a big school?
Yeah. I imagine about like Lincoln or Washington. There were a lot of grade schools in Saginaw.
So you had several classrooms in your school?
Oh, yeah.
Did you take your lunch? Or did you come home?
I think I came home for lunch. I don't think we had that far to walk. And Saginaw had about 2 high schools, public high schools, and a couple of parochial high schools.
How did you happen to decide to go to college?
Well, my father always gave us the option. My older brother graduated from the University of Michigan. Then my next brother, he was in love. He wanted to get married. Well, he had to go to the Army, too. That kind of interfered, World War I. And when he came back, the girl that he was going to marry, her father was general manager of a wholesale lumber company. And my brother just kind of fell into a good job there and never went on to school, but he had a wonderful job. Her father died suddenly of a heart attack, so he got his job. Mm-hmm. So if he'd gone to college, he really couldn't have done any better. Yeah. He knew the lumber business. And my sister went to art school for a couple of years. And I don't know, I told my father that I wanted to go to the University of Chicago, which didn't sit too well with him because the University of Michigan was just an hour away. But he let me go.
What did you major in?
French and Spanish. I taught French and Spanish.
Where did you teach?
I taught in Danville for 2 years, and I taught in Libertyville 1 year. And then I got married. You know where Libertyville is, north of Chicago.
How did you end up in Danville?
Well, because when the university gets you teaching jobs, I think I told you this, it's usually in the state where you got your degree. If I'd gone to the University of Michigan, I probably would have ended up teaching somewhere in Michigan. And I don't know, I just got a job in Danville, and that's how I met my husband.
So it worked out well.
Yeah, it seemed to. I know I didn't want to teach for 50 years, so I think it did.
When you were growing up, when one of your family was sick, did your mother have home remedies? She'd try, or did you have a doctor come in?
You know, I don't remember much sickness in the family, really. I think when we were sick, we had a doctor. Because Saginaw is a pretty big city.
Were you ever quarantined?
Oh, I imagine we had. I know I had all the chicken pox and all those things, so I suppose we were quarantined. It's just a blur, all that. I'm not. Don't remember too much about being sick.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
You told me earlier that one of your brothers was killed in World War I.
He wasn't killed. He was commanding officer of the 311th Engineers. They went ahead. They went over. He was in Pershing's. You've heard of General Pershing. He was in Pershing's command, and they went ahead before the foot soldiers came and built the bridges and did the roads and things like that. And he died of double pneumonia, just exposure and overwork, which was just as bad as dying in action.
How else did World War I affect your family? You were about getting out of high school?
I was a freshman in college when I got word that he. And I went home that weekend because it just crushed me, because he didn't have to. He wasn't drafted. He was out of college, and he wouldn't have been drafted. They weren't drafting. He was 23, I think, and or more than that. No, he was older than that. But he just felt like his country. He felt it was his duty to go, and I don't know. It hit my mother and father real hard because he didn't have to go. And I think that they thought it was a life wasted. He really had a wonderful education, had the world by the tail, really, and then gave it all up.
Was he married?
No. But I think they felt that he didn't really have to die.
Did any of your other brothers have to be in the war?
Yeah, my other brother was drafted. But he never got out of the country. I think he was in Texas or somewhere. Kansas or something, I don't remember. But he wanted to get married. that was the thing. He wanted to get married. He didn't want to go to fight. He was just the opposite.
I can understand feeling like that.
Yeah, he was just the opposite. He didn't feel that call as desperately as my older brother did.
When you were in college, did you live in a dormitory?
Yeah, that's. Well, the University of Chicago 50 years ago was much smaller than any of the schools now. You know, I mean, they were like, Illinois, I don't think had even 10,000 students. Probably not that many 50 years ago. Yeah, they were all gray stone buildings, and they were sort of built together right on the campus. They all had separate names, like Northwestern. Have you ever seen Northwestern campus? Yeah, my youngest daughter went to Northwestern. Those sororities up there, they're all different, individual, but they're all joined. The concrete or whatever it is. And that's the way the University of Chicago was.
How did you happen to meet your husband?
Well, the English teacher that I knew there that taught with me knew him. And she had me for dinner one night and invited him. And I don't know, a couple nights later he called me and asked me to go out to dinner, and we just started dating. And I only taught there 2 years, and then I went up to Libertyville, and I don't know whether absence makes the heart go fonder anyway. I think he missed me when I went to Libertyville because I only taught there 1 year, and then we were married.
What was he doing at that point?
He was running his father's bank. It was a little bank called the Porterfield State Bank in Fairmount, little town. You know where it is? Well, have you ever heard of Catlin? Well, it's about 6 miles from Catlin. And but his friends were mostly in Danville. So that's how I met him. It was just one of those quirks of fate.
Then after you were taught in Libertyville, you were married.
That June.
What type of wedding did you have?
Just a family wedding. I remember we were just married in the bay window of my home. And his brother came from Youngstown, Ohio, and stood up with him, and my sister was my attendant, that's all. But I remember we had a nice big dinner after.
Where did you move after you were married?
To Fairmount, where he had this little bank. And I wasn't used to a little town. The first thing they told me was, you'll have to learn to play bridge, because that's the way you meet people, get invited. So I learned to play bridge. I never was crazy about bridge, but I learned to play bridge because anyway. I played mostly for the fellowship, just to get out and meet people.
How long did you live in Fairmount then?
Oh, let's see, about Mary Kay was just a baby. About 7 years, and then I guess I told you about the moratorium here and the banks all being closed. And the 2 banks here were closed and weren't allowed to open. So they asked my husband, there was a committee of businessmen here in town, was formed to see what they could do about, because Monticello's a county seat. They just really had to have a bank. And so it was a community effort, really. And they came over and talked to my husband and asked him if he'd be interested. And of course he would. He could see where it was, a better business proposition than a little bank in Fairmount. And so he came over for about 6 months before we moved here. He would drive, he'd stay here about from Monday to Thursday, and then he'd come home. He had good help in the Fairmount Bank, so he could be away from there.
Did he keep the bank in Fairmount after you decided to move
Well, did you ever hear of Seidel? The bank in Seidel was not allowed to open after moratorium. Too many loans that didn't, weren't paid off, which he always said was a mistake. If the government had just given the farmers more time to pay off their loans, a lot of these banks would never have gone under. But you know, the government doesn't do things that way. It's they slap it down and you're out of luck. And the Seidel president of the bank committed suicide, and he was a wonderful man. He was a good friend of ours, and he was such a good Christian and helped the farmers. They were just crushed after that. But he couldn't live with having failed. And his wife heard a shot when she was still in bed, and he was down on the sofa, and he killed himself. That just about killed my husband because he thought so much of him. He was an older man, but my husband looked up to him. And so the Seidel Bank wasn't allowed to open. So somehow or other, I don't know, with the banking with Springfield, somehow they managed. They moved the Porterfield State Bank to Seidel because there was another bank in Fairmount. There were two banks there, and they didn't need two banks. So, and they changed the name to the Seidel State Bank. So now the Porterfield Bank is the Seidel State Bank.
Did the family continue to own it? Or?
Well, after my husband died, the directors over there, people that lived there, came to me and asked me if I just wouldn't sell out, which made sense. So it was a community-owned bank. So I sold the stock.
The Porterfield Bank then in Fairmount didn't close. Well, I suppose it closed for a short time. And
it was the first state bank in Vermilion County to be allowed to open, which was a good, I guess that's one reason that my husband kind of had a good reputation. But Seidel Bank's going all right now.
Do you recall who some of the businessmen were that were on the committee that came together?
John Hott, and you know the Hott House. John Hott's been dead a long time, but he and Alan Moore were sort of the founders of the Pepsin plant here. Well, John Hott, and there was a Dr. Bumstead. That name doesn't mean anything to you.
I've heard the name.
He was a doctor. And Burl Eady, he was a lawyer here. And there were 5 or 6 more. I can't think. The doctor over at Bement. You know his.
I can't think.
Well, his father, and I'm trying to think what his name was. Scott.
Oh.
Scott. Bill Scott is the doctor over at BMed. I think he's just retired. His father was on the board. His father had a very nice department store where Kaiser's is now. In fact, I think Kaiser's bought him out. But it was a clothing store. It wasn't like Kaiser's.
What was it called? Maybe it was just Scott's?
I don't know. But it was a very nice clothing store. It didn't have everything like Kaiser's. We called Kaiser's the dime store. But it was really a mostly a men's and boys' clothing store. A very nice store. I can't think.
Well, that's all right. To backtrack just a little, we need to have you tell us your husband's name and where he was born.
Well, his name was Willard Blaine Porterfield, and he was born in Fairmount. He went to university, majored in commerce, business, banking.
And how many children did you have?
3, 2 girls and a boy.
So what year did you move to Monticello?
He came over in 33, but we came over the spring of 34 because Helen, my oldest daughter, was in the 1st grade at Fairmount, and we didn't want to take her out of school in the middle of the year. So we stayed until the spring of 34.
Was it difficult running a household during the Depression?
No. This town was full of beautiful old homes that you could rent. We moved here. Do you know where Don Pyatt lives? Mm-hmm. Well, we moved here, moved into that house, and we rented it for about $30 a month, something like that. We could have bought it for $5,000, but I don't know. There were things about the house I didn't like, and we didn't buy it. Mm-hmm. And then Stoddards had bought the lot. You know where Bob Galt lives?
No, I don't know where that.
Well, it's right across from the hospital. Uh-huh. It's white. It's stone and white. Uh-huh. It's north of that the newest house uh-huh. up there, right across from the hospital. Yeah. Stoddards owned that lot and were going to build, and they never got around to building. They always kept putting it off. So my husband bought the lot from them. They decided they didn't want to build, mm-hmm. and we built that house. Oh. And that's where we raised our family. Mm-hmm. Really, they were all in school when we lived there. And then when my husband died, suddenly of a heart attack, he came home from work, from the bank, drove in and said he was a little bit tired, and laid down on the sofa, and I heard this groaning, and he was gone in about 5 minutes. So I didn't want that big house anymore. 4 bedrooms, it was just too much. Because my family was all gone then. So I moved to South Bend. Helen lived up there, and I sold my house. And I didn't like it up there because my friends, I couldn't go around with her friends. They were all young people. And when you're a widow and alone, you just don't make friends. I joined church. I joined a women's club, and but my friends were really more down here. So Mildred called me once, and she said, "There's a house in Stoddard Acres for sale. Come down and look at it. This house." Yeah. So I came down the next weekend, and it wasn't exactly what I would have picked, because I would rather not have my garage under the house, and I'd rather not have this big yard and all that. But I guess I was just so anxious to get back to Monticello that I bought it. Yeah, and that was 20 years ago, and I've been here ever since.
When you and your husband first moved here, and he was, which bank did he?
The National Bank.
The National Bank.
The National Bank will be 50 years old this year. The State Bank's a lot younger. They about 30 years, something like that.
How did people feel about a bank reopening finally?
Oh, I think they were all thrilled to have a bank, and I think the DeLand Bank was closed for a while too.
Were people resentful since the bank had been closed for so long?
Well, you see, this is an entirely new bank. Mm-hmm. It wasn't the Moore Bank or the First National. The First National is where the Candlewick is now. Mm-hmm. And the Moore Bank is where the National Bank is now. And the Moore assets were just turned over to the National Bank. They just took over the assets. And they eventually paid out 100%. Mm-hmm. But the government, they get real antsy, and they don't give them time to work these things out. I think both banks eventually paid out 100%. Nobody lost any money. But it just took time. Mm-hmm. Now, I think people were glad to... now, I don't know whether they were glad to have us come over. Maybe they preferred to have... But... nothing we can do about that.
Do you recall who some of the other men were that worked in the bank with your husband?
Yes, Mr. Moeller came from Cerro Gordo. He was cashier. And Mr. Frey, they're all dead now. Now, Bill Welch, do you know who he is in the National Bank? He's been there. My husband hired him, so he's been there a long time. I don't think there are any. They're all, they'd all be up in their 80s.
What was the bank like inside when you?
It was beautiful. Alan Moore. See, the Moores, it was their own money, and Alan Moore made millions in the syrup pits, and he and John Hott made a lot of money. They had hand-painted murals, some artists from New York. The one wall, I guess that would be the west wall, was hand-painted murals. It's just beautiful. And the place where you write checks, those places in the center, they were beautiful wrought iron, and it was beautiful. Lots of marble. The tellers, the counter, that was all pure, beautiful Italian marble. And more people in town, when they remodeled the bank, got pieces of marble and made coffee tables and things. I didn't get any. I didn't know about it. I was living in South Bend, and I guess I didn't know. See them tear it up, but they just had to have more space. You see, the bank now is twice as big as it was because there was a restaurant next door, and they bought the restaurant building and expanded west.
Did they use the upstairs offices, or was there something else up there then?
The only office that they used was Bela Stoddard. Mildred's husband had an office up there. But that's what they're doing now, They're putting an elevator in, and they're going to use the whole second floor.
Did they use the second floor at all for anything then?
They had a meeting room up there, and they could have little suppers and things like that. Yeah, a little bit, but not for any big business.
Wasn't there a roller skating rink above one of the banks?
No.
Maybe it was the other.
Oh, it might have been the State Bank. Yeah, they had dances up above the State Bank. I remember when we came here, there was a dance club called the Cosmos Dance Club, and they met up there above. They called it Kratz Hall. Kratz owned the building. And, they may have roller skated up there. I don't remember.
What were some of the other businesses on the square when you moved here?
Well, I told you about the community building, that Eisner's. The State Bank was a grocery store, Evans Grocery Store. Raycraft's drugstore was there. Mr. Leeper, Jim, you know who Jim Leeper is? His uncle had a clothing, not a furniture store, but a clothing store. And when he sold out Mr. Fox, who's out at Tapman, he and his son had a clothing store there. I think it was men's clothing. Gooker's drugstore was there, where the bouquet shop is now. And the Scott store was where Kaiser's was. And the next door to that, I think there's a barber shop in there now, was a nice grocery store. Can't think of their name. I know I can just see them. They had a nice grocery store. And where Montgomery Ward, that was a nice restaurant.
What kind of restaurant was it?
Well, they served meals, 3 meals a day. A couple, I don't know where they came from. Their name was Stamets, S-T-A. They owned the. When they left here, they owned the Surrey over in Decatur, which it was a nice restaurant. I think it was called the Surrey, not far from Haynes and Essex down there. I don't know. They're probably all gone now. Well, let's see.
Were there any women's clothing stores? You mentioned a couple of men's.
No, I don't remember any women's clothing stores. Frank Cressup had a grocery store too, a couple of doors from Googer's drugstore. Courthouse was just like it is today. I don't remember much about. Elmer Amke had a nice grocery store. There were about 4 grocery stores here. He had a grocery and Harry Combs's father, Lyndon Combs's father. Did I forget his name? He had a meat market, just meat, and awfully good meat. You know, you don't see meat markets anymore, but he had just sold meat, and that was about next to Montgomery Ward's, right in there.
Did you ever attend any of the programs at the Opera Building?
Yeah.
What ones do you recall what they were?
No, I don't. They'd have musicals, you know. Yeah.
It was in
plays.
The room that the library occupies now, wasn't it? Did they use that room for the...
I was thinking it was upstairs.
Well, I wasn't sure.
I was thinking it was upstairs and they had a stage. Kind of like the Monticello Theater now.
What was downstairs below it then?
You know, I'm not clear on that building too much about. Was the library there in those days?
The library used to be in the garden room, I think. What they call the garden room now.
I really, that's kind of vague. I don't remember much about it. I remember going to the library. I've kind of forgotten where they were.
What organizations and churches did you belong to in town?
Well, the Presbyterian Church, and I joined the Women's Club, and I was president of both Lincoln and high school PTAs, but they died out. Nobody came but the teachers. It got to the point where I felt sorry for the teachers. They don't have them anymore, do they?
No.
Well, it was really pathetic. The parents didn't bother to come, most of them, the ones who should have been there. So the conscientious parents would come, but the ones who really should come and find out more about schools didn't show up. And lots of meetings, there'd be more teachers than parents there, so it just died out. Too bad, I guess, but that's life, I guess.
Before the interview, we were talking about the old community building, which was across the street from the Presbyterian Church.
The lovely old White House.
How many rooms did it have?
Well, it had an entry hall, and then a nice size living room, I guess you call it, and dining room and kitchen downstairs. The Women's Club wasn't as big as it is now. And then it had a couple of bedrooms upstairs, and families that weren't too big, lived there. I remember Beulah Williams and her husband, when they were first married, lived there, and they were kind of custodians.
So they kind of rented out rooms, the upstairs?
Well, they let them live there, and they kind of took care of it, I think. The kind of custodian, and maybe they paid just a little bit of rent. And there were other families that lived there. It wasn't a place where you'd live forever because you had to live upstairs, and if you had a family, it wasn't the kind of place you could. So there were a couple of families there who lived there, and I think they were custodians, really. Sort of took care of it.
And then you used the downstairs for your meetings?
I don't remember what they did. Maybe they had a little kitchen upstairs. I don't know. But I know they had to live upstairs. Because the downstairs was used for meetings. I don't know. I have to talk to Mildred about that, or somebody who really remembers. I don't remember. I don't remember that.
Do you recall how long ago that building was gone?
Oh, it happens. They tore that building down soon after we came here. Not too many, maybe 10 years or so. And where the Chrysler building next to it, was a Chrysler. Now it's a city mental health and all that in there. That their parking lot, where there are always a lot of used cars, or there were when Chrysler had it, that was the Presbyterian manse. And it was a nice big frame house. And that caused a little friction in our church because there were a lot of people who didn't think we should move. Someone bought it and moved it back on the street that faces the Wabash Railroad. Back by the FS, that street beyond the FS. They moved it down there. And some of the people in the church didn't like it because they just didn't want business encroaching on, they thought that should stay there, but I don't know, it was moved. And then we had to buy another manse. I don't know, maybe Mildred's told you all this.
No.
No. I don't know how much of it.
The old parsonage then is gone though.
No, it's the old one. No, it's still a house down on that
is it?
road down there. Some couple bought it, a family bought it, and they had to put in a foundation on the lot. They bought that lot across from the Wabash station there, and then they just had movers, how they move houses, and just plunked it there. And I was in it once, just after they bought it and fixed it up, and it was just real nice. But the lady, the girl that runs the tea shop, Pam Ashcraft. Well, the lady that they bought the house from, Ashcraft bought that house next to it, she's a member of our church. She really was upset because she didn't want business, became a big parking lot with a lot of bright lights, and she didn't like it. Her name was Nellie Barker, and she really was upset.
I can understand.
Yeah, because she didn't like all those bright lights and all those used cars sitting there.
Do you remember what you were doing when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Yes, because it was the day we moved from Don Pyatt's house where we were living to our new home, and we didn't have there wasn't television, but we didn't have a radio or anything hooked up. Everything, furniture was just sitting in the middle of the room. So we didn't hear about it all day, and my husband came home and he said, Pearl Harbor's been bombed. I said, how do you know that? He said, well, they told me downtown. They'd heard over the radio, and that's how we heard about it. So I always remember the day we moved was Pearl Harbor Day.
How did World War II affect your life? Were you affected by rationing?
Yes. Maybe Mildred's told you. We went to the high school and canned fruit, beans, and we made our own soap. They gave us recipes. The government gave you so much lard and lye and stuff. Now when I think about it, I don't like the idea, but it was good soap. You would kind of scrape off and put in your wash machine, and it would dissolve, and it cleaned. I guess that's the way they make laundry soap, or the bar soap, like Phil Snap. And the government set up a canning program at the high school, And we all went into it. I remember we would get these lugs of apricots, beautiful apricots. They bought some off, and the government had them shipped here. And we'd pay so much a can, and canned. Oh, it was wonderful. And green beans, and peas, and everything. And I don't know where all that stuff came from. The government set
But
it
you
up.
could go to the school in Canada, and then you
We'd go to the
pay
school,
something.
and pay so much, and I think it was like 10 cents a can or something like that, real cheap. I never had so much canned goods in my life. We all went into it in a big way. It was a patriotic thing to do, and we had 3 children.
Did that continue throughout the war?
Continued for a couple of years. It was one of those government war projects, you know, to save all, do what you could. But it was fun. We'd go down there, several of us, and I think you had to sign up and go at certain times.
Did you have any other projects like that?
Oh, we knitted. I remember I knitted scarves till I was blue in the face, and socks and mittens. Oh, if you were patriotic, you were doing that. And we went to, I think, the different churches and rolled bandages. Big rolls for things like that.
What did you make the bandages out of?
I think the government sent material or something. I'm not sure about that. All I know is that we'd be there and we'd make these bandages. You just felt like you had to be patriotic and do something. So that's all. So far, I haven't thought about it for. Let's see, World War II. That was a long time ago.
Do you recall your first radio?
Yes. Vaguely. It was a kind of a big thing shaped like that. And the only station we got was KDKA in Pittsburgh. I think that was the only station on for quite a while. It was funny. Kind of funny voice, raspy. Not very good, but yeah.
What were some of your favorite radio programs?
Oh, on Sunday afternoon, I remember we'd make popcorn and we'd sit and listen to The Shadow, which was one of these eerie, The Shadow Knows, and Amos and Andy, which now they would call, what do you call it?
Racist.
Racist, yeah. But it never entered our head. It was just a funny program. The word racism never entered our thoughts. We never gave it a thought that it was racist. We just enjoyed it. They were funny. They were comedians. And Jack Benny had radio way back then. I think those are about the 3 most favorite. Weren't any soap operas or anything like that in those days.
What president do you recall most vividly?
Well, I don't know that I have any that's any particular. I always felt sorry for Hoover because I thought he was a brilliant man and was given a bum rap. Everything was blamed on him, the Depression, and it wasn't. Shouldn't have been. I don't know. They come and go. They didn't, any of them just knock me cold or anything.
Well, I thank you very much, and I've enjoyed this.
Well, I hope I haven't babbled too much.